Full disclosure, news and commentary number 113, 113, 113, 113, 113. My view is obviously awesome. My kids swimming in a pool, um, super early in the morning. One of the joys of having children. I was honestly up pretty early myself because I wanted to get this full disclosure done. I'm going to try to have breakfast with my friend Vanessa, who I used to write with at Lethal Wrestling way back in the day. My kid definitely wanted to go swimming. Weren't able to do it yesterday because we technically weren't able to check in until after midnight. Yo, mad story. All of which is contained in the All Elite Weekend War Journals. I put out 3 of them, and we're ready to jump in. So I hope everybody's doing well. This is crazy. Got wind whipping up here. We're on the 4th floor at the Omni Hotel. Wind whipping up. We got 2 things to open. Let's get to them, shall we? I thought the All Elite Weekend in general was a huge success. It's going to be weird watching Elevation tonight, knowing that I saw most of the matches on Friday night. It's cool though. So, as per usual, I reveal this to you the same time I reveal it to myself. Oh my gosh. People know I'm a Doctor Doom freak. That shirt definitely gets much love. Thank you to the person who sent it to me. People have been taking credit less and less for these. Well, that's not exactly true. Some of them are really obvious. That one, no note. And now we'll go to the next one. I'm looking forward to breakfast with Vanessa and the kids. It was really great for Dylan to meet my kids. It's probably pretty obvious, but my kids are, it's a cliche to say they're everything, but I love having them around and having them enjoy that AEW pay-per-view made it so fulfilling, just so wonderful, so great. All right, here we go. I have no idea what this one is. It's revealed to you the same time as it's revealed to me. 1, 2, 3. BU, they'll adjust. Bro, if that doesn't say me, just a second. I'm going to wear this thing with pride all day, including at the breakfast and all the rest of it. And of course, who was more him than Doctor Doom? So certainly a triumph of unboxing gifts. Boy, I love this thing. Different color for me too, which I'm all about. Speaking of different color, one day we'll talk about on Patreon my dating life once I got to the mainland. I was just talking to people there, people whose kid is there now playing with my kid. How does he look? Sometimes people playing with my youngest can look a little shell shocked because she just comes at you a mile a minute, talking and spreading the facts and being that kid. But they seem to be getting along quite well. He's smiling. He's smiling. That's great. So Peach State looked like it was a return to form. They drew 110. Had a bunch of angles going on. Shane Knowles was intimately involved with the show. Undeniable there, which meant Shane Marks was there defending his title against Jeter with a non-solid finish, which means that opens up the program and continues to do their thing. Tyler Culprit, a huge weekend, not only winning the Pro South title, but getting one over on Ace Haven at the Peach State show as well. I'm glad there was a report for that Belladonna all-women's show, described as almost a sellout, cagey, so you don't have to put up numbers. That happened on the 15th, and let me see. APW drew 72. Really cool. You should really read the link on gwhnewsandnotes.blogspot.com about Luke and PJ Hawks and how they did stuff for that show Heels in that USA Today article. It's also really interesting who showed up and showed out for that show Heels as extras. I think it's really telling about the people who really want to do this thing and really want to make it work. I think that's a really cool story as well. Alex Kane getting signed to Major League Wrestling. Dude, that feels awesome, doesn't it? Alex Kane is one of those guys that you could just see had it, and for him to get a call up like that, I think it feels really good. I think people can, and it's not deniable. Sorry, there's a can rolling around and it's driving me a little crazy, so I'm gonna take care of that. Um, I think it feels really good, right? If you know Alex Kane, take care of my trash, blam. Um, that he just always felt like he was presented himself as something different. I think once he got the look with the mouthpiece in, started throwing people all over the place. He didn't get there by being like everybody else. He got there by being something different. Um, anyway, Um, PWX has a show coming up June 19th. I don't want to fail to mention them. Heroes and Villains show. It reminded me of when, what was the Shitbird League that ran in Cornelia as well. But they used to do the big Heroes and Villains thing. You know, that show that used kids at one point that was going to be around forever and all that shit. I remember they would do the Heroes and Villains thing, and I remember thinking that was actually a really cool concept. It's so cool that PWX is using it, and then there's a group called Action Wrestling Heroes and Villains that is having their debut show soon as well. Um, not this weekend. This weekend, Saturday, my childhood friend Ray, and I can honestly say childhood friend. We've been friends since sixth or seventh grade, and he's coming into town for a week. Just for me and him to hang out, for him to meet the kids. I'm thrilled. I haven't really seen him, I believe, since I got married, since he was at my wedding. Is that right? That sounds crazy, but it's probably true. So 14, 15 years. And then he kind of dropped off the radar, but he got in contact with me pretty recently. And we've been chatting it up every day, and I'm really thrilled that he's going to be here. I mean, I've had a number of big weekends, of course, between going to Georgia and Alabama. Um, and people asked me repeatedly, "Are you going to be coming back to like that area, Georgia and Alabama?" And the answer is yes. July 17th, I'm going to be there. That weekend of July 17th. So um, you can try to get with me accordingly. I'll be at IWE on July 17th because that looks to be a big show. If you think I'm going to miss O'Shea Edwards against Alexander Hammerstone, along with the cast of characters, Logan Creed. I'm not gonna miss Danny Jordan defending her title. I'm not gonna miss David Ali continuing to rise with his group. I want to see all of it. So I'm gonna be at IWE on July 17th, which is a Saturday. Maybe I'll try to plan a weekend around that and see what's going down. Um, but the show of the weekend, and when is the last time we've said this? The show of the weekend was clearly Pro South. Packed that building out. And believe me, 100 people in that building. I don't even know where you put 100 people in that little building, but they did it. And of course, the highlighted by the ladder match, but of course, the Austin Towers defending his title against Tyler Culprit in a cage, where Tyler Culprit managed to come out ahead, nefariously getting his League of Terribles in there when the referee went down. All of them just mobbing Austin Tower, but Tyler Culprit finding a way to win. That killer instinct that I talked about, his ability to go for the throat, paid off handsomely. So I think it's important to note one that Tyler Culprit and Austin Towers should be very proud that they're the main reasons that they drew that house, along with me. So bookers, um, and people with power who insert themselves into shows. Note, I did come into town. I did do a thing for Pro South, but my focus and my goal was primarily to get their show over and for them to draw a house at the next show. That was my primary thought, not how am I going to get myself into matches and make myself look good and be out there 100 times in the show. I mean, Ace gave me a great deal of freedom at Pro South. I probably could have done a bunch of things, and I thought about it. I'm like, oh, I'd love to jump on a commentary, or I would love to be there, visible here, there, and everywhere. But then I realized, like, you don't have to do that, right? Better to do one thing incredibly well and concentrate on it and be surprising and be cool and do all that stuff. But ultimately, it was about getting Tyler Culprit over and really getting that match over, emphasizing the fact that it was in the cage, emphasizing the fact to make sure that people knew next week was going to be a happening. And I think that was accomplished. One thing that upset me a little bit, and I mean I'll talk to him about this, but like Austin Tower, um, his attitude afterwards was kind of like my silence speaks volumes, and whatever. I don't, I it. I'm curious. Like I was happy to see the post about like now I'm going to work out and that kind of thing. That was cool. But I think the general surly attitude about having to lose apparently or not liking what was booked or the whole attitude around that whole thing about a title loss, there was something about it that just felt distinctly like two steps backwards about it. I think if he's truly upset about losing that title for whatever reason, I think there was a different way to go about it. If he's putting over a character thing of like, well, my guy wouldn't be happy about losing. Yeah, but he would be sort of fiercely determined. That's certainly a more of a moneymaker of a guy who's fiercely determined because he was wronged when he lost a title, rather than just being like, meh, it's not cool. It's not what I would have wanted said about it. I don't know. I just think that there's attitude stuff when guys are putting things out in public that would serve them much better. And I'm just on citing Austin Towers' example, but I see examples of it all the time. You know? That image that you put out on social media is so invaluable. And there's guys who've been preaching this since the internet really began about really seeing how you frame yourself because it's all sales. Everything is sales, and wrestling is not the exception to that rule. It is the epitome of that rule. Everything is about the image that you project. Everything is about putting things out there. I mean, how many bookers do we know, or people who are in charge of different wrestling leagues in and around Georgia, who the guys simply don't like, and not for good reasons, like, because they're a hard, tough decision maker, or they're a storyteller with a very focused vision, and sometimes certain wrestlers don't benefit from that, so they don't like it. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about guys who just generally come across as condescending pricks, and I don't think that they even know how much they hurt themselves, or they would pretend that they don't care. Right? And you're probably thinking somebody that I'm thinking of in this regard is Gary Lamb. But the opposite is true with Gary. I think Gary has established himself as a guy who, dude, I'm just going to put this out here and this is who I am and that's the way it is. Other people think that they do that. I think one of the tricks that Gary Lamb has pulled off, and I know you're shocked, like I'm doing this thing in praise of Gary Lamb, but it's because of like um he knows who he is distinctly, and when he does stuff, not everything I think is calculated. I think he would pretend that everything he does is calculated. It isn't. But I think everything he does definitely has a flavor of that's a guy who just puts himself out there, right? And I think that's why he attracts people who you wouldn't think that he would attract, because there is an element of like brashness about it, but there's also an element of Gary Lamb speaking up what he really thinks. And here's the important part. When it comes to doing what he does, which is promoting, um, I don't think that you could talk about how it could be more successful. I think Gary Lamb would even talk about how it could be more successful. But at least he has some kind of track record of success that's worth a shit. And I think others would be wise to learn that. You can't brag if you haven't pulled off a successful show post COVID, post like COVID era when everybody was shut down, then shut the fuck up. Like we really don't want to hear it. And if you used to draw big huge houses before COVID and now you haven't done it yet, it could just mean people just don't give a fuck about your brand. Or it could mean even worse, people don't give a fuck about you. And it's reflected in the fact that they haven't come back to watch. And that applies to a number of groups. Um, but again, Pro South should be very happy. They take show of the weekend. This weekend, of course, anytime we hit the beginning of the month, stuff really ramps up. Not the least of which, you got Southern Honor. You're going to have Shindig coming up on June 19th. I'm curious to see what the payoff of that is going to be because we're going to have Team Manders. We're going to have Team Sexton going at it and a bunch of other stuff as well. We're going to have Griff Garrison against um, Michael Judas. And the fact that I'm able to do that off the top of my head tells you a lot. That means they've done a really good job booking and laying things out. Of course, at Southern Honor, you have big matches as well, not the least of which is Logan Creed against the champion David Ali, and I believe Skrilla making his debut in Southern Honor against Sunny Days. And hanging out with Dylan last night at the show. I'm just going to talk briefly. I mean, you can watch the War Journals, but really the pay-per-view was the shining star of the weekend, as it should have been. That thing was an unqualified success. People were super hyped. Of course, they benefited from that. I know that's one of those things that people are going to critique, like, oh, well, they're just benefiting from having the first full crowd for pay per view. Well, duh, right? But like, it was a well done card, Um, and the fan meet and greet stuff. I mean, if I had a ton of money to blow, I think it would have been a different experience. As it was fine. Like I said, my kids make the best of stuff. And I mean, I think I've booked my kids pretty well. um, oh, now they're racing in the pool. I feel bad for the other kid. I should like because Veronica does not like losing competitions at all, and they're both pretty close. Let's see who's gonna win. Who's gonna win? Who's gonna win? Who's gonna win? Who's gonna win? Veronica won. Oh, it's fun though that she's having fun with the kid. She's so good socially. Um, there's wrestlers who could learn from that. But obviously, the pay per view was the crown jewel. The Dynamite was really cool. Getting to see part of an elevation taping and those guys and women really benefiting from being the first out there was pretty awesome. Um, the meet and greet thing was fine. I think if we had more money to throw around, if I had been more on it and gotten certain people for the meet and greet for the kids to see, it would have been great. Though I thought the idea that they had 3 lines that were free meet and greets um, was a really cool one. And it's one of those things that I think is going to improve over time. Um, cool. So, what am I going to talk about in the commentary? Because we're here at the commentary. For the commentary, I'm going to talk about armchair booking. And armchair booking gets a bad rap, and because wrestling fans have spoiled it like they fucking spoil everything else, right? Um, but there are benefits to the armchair booking. I'm going to help give you a guide to when armchair booking can be a benefit, right? Give you a set of standards that you can use to determine whether something that you've watched, how was the booking? How successful was that booking? And how you could be a better armchair booker, because that's part of it, right? Critiquing things and analyzing them is an important part of what we do as professional wrestlers, and it's never formalized. Or you just have old dudes barking at you of like, of course you should know what to do, and it's so obvious, and blah 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 blah. Like whenever I listen to Jim Cornette's armchair booking, it's always fucking terrible. But then he's got a bunch of sycophants telling him how great he is. And the reason it's terrible is because he never has anything in context, because he doesn't watch anything in its entirety. He doesn't get the flow of what's going on. And he certainly doesn't have anything that would resemble a modern sensibility of what would be interesting to a modern wrestling fan. It's just always going back to these tried and true things. Like his thing about how he would book Charlotte against Rhea Ripley and develop that and have Ric Flair hold her down and she's in the figure four and they would get that heat on her. It was so fucking terrible. And people were like, "Oh, it was great." It was terrible, right? And after my guide, I think you'll see. And I'm going to introduce this new segment that I'm going to throw into videos called Platinum Woulda, just to give you an idea. Right? So I'm going to armchair book something major that happened in AEW and something major that's happening in WWE. Tell you how I would book it, and then I will let you. And what am I doing? What did I say before? Everything is sales. So I'm going to present this story and I'm going to sell it to you. But hopefully, it's just a good product, right? I won't have to sell you that hard, technique wise, if what I'm telling you makes sense, it interests you, and it's better than what they did or are currently doing. Does that make sense? Cool. So let's go. Platinum Woulda. Um, they're determined to do Anthony Ogogo against Cody Rhodes, and they paid it off last night, and Cody Rhodes went over. Um, and I would say, and I think almost anyone there would admit, even at AEW, that the crowd was kind of split and they're beginning to turn on Cody. It's obviously not something that they wanted. They didn't want him to take on the moniker of the American Dream for this match and have flag waving rah rah stuff and have it go 50% against him and 50% de facto for Anthony Ogogo and QT's stable, which they really de emphasized. I mean, QT was at ringside but was a non-factor in this whole thing. And QT didn't even cut promos leading up to this thing. I just thought it was not the strongest booking they could have done. What could they have done that was stronger? I think when, Cody cuts this promo, the promo that was much maligned, I think, was it a powerful promo? Yes. Did it really go for it? Yes. Did it feel weird him talking about Brandy and their kid to be without having Brandy there? Yeah, I think that was weird. I think I would have had her there. Now, I don't know where she is with the pregnancy, etc., etc. Again, this is armchair booking stuff, right? So there's logistics that I'm not factoring in and all that kind of stuff. But let's say she was there. And let's say he hits this powerful promo and this idea of, so for one night I'm going to be the American Dream. I think as much as I usually hate people interrupting, I think this is one of those cases where you have somebody interrupt, and I think it's Anthony Ogogo. And he goes, "You're setting me up as this, like, I should be this grateful immigrant," because that was the crux of Cody's promo, right? "You're setting me up, I should be this grateful immigrant." He's like, "I'm not gonna be grateful." He's like, "You guys are lucky to have me," right? And then talk about Anthony Ogogo comes across as more of a monster, right? Like, just look at the guys that I've destroyed with this punch. He was just like, think of the things I can destroy. And he's like, and Cody, this match is going to happen between me and you. Think of me destroying you. And then when Brandy gets kind of fiery, as she tends to do, and sort of like steps up, and with Cody holding her back, he looks at her and just goes like, "Yeah, think about what I could destroy with one punch to the stomach," and stares at her. Dude, that is heat on a whole different level. He doesn't have to threaten it. Somebody doesn't have to stop him. He just has to imply it and look at Brandy. And I think that's a different level of heat. I think it's a different level of edge. And it's one of these things of Anthony Ogogo, instead of them emphasizing he's only had like two kind of squash matches. He's never had his real match. It'll be his first real match, which again is just a sympathetic thing towards Anthony Ogogo. Instead, you just do this thing of like, he's in control of Cody. It's Cody who's sort of irrational with his emotions. It's Cody that's taken out of his game. And then they can push this fact that QT has gotten Anthony Ogogo here, where he seems like he's more ready for this match than Cody is, and that it's Cody that's likely to make a big mistake and blah, 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 blah. That way they come into this match instead of like jingoistic flag rah rah stuff. I think that's de-emphasized in favor of Cody, legacy of family, defending the honor of his family and his daughter to be against Anthony Ogogo, who threatened Brandy indirectly to like punch her in the stomach with this punch that we've seen. Everybody bleeds from the mouth when they get hit by it. It just crushes them. And this idea that he would even threaten that. And then I also thought if they're really pushing this USA versus UK thing, that's fine too. I think Anthony Ogogo cuts another promo, cool as a cucumber, leading up to it. And he goes like, Cody, he's like, you want to push this? I mean, because that's what it is. It's this blatant narrative that they're shoehorning in. Then call it out, the Mercutio factor, right? If Mercutio in Romeo and Juliet says, this is kind of a sappy, dumb love story and they're stupid kids, it prevents you from being able to critique it in that way because it's already been brought up. That's what I call the Mercutio factor. Let's bring it in for wrestling. I think if Anthony Gogo calls out the obvious, which is you're trying to create this false narrative. Fine, I'm going to run with this false narrative because you guys, I am proud of being British. And I do think America is deeply flawed. And I'm going to point out all of those flaws in the course of our match. Cody, if this is what you want, this is what you got. Because guess what? At the pay per view, the British are coming. And I think you give him this jingoistic, over the top, I'm leaning into being a red coat entrance. And I think it kind of gives a pomp and a circumstance. And you have this underlying thing of this Anthony Ogogo threatened Brandy with punching her in the stomach while she's pregnant with this punch that's been shown to be devastating. I think all of that would factor into a different feel for that match. Cool. Well, okay, Steve, that's cool. How would you book the WWE differently? I'm going to start with something that's obvious. They should not have broken up the Hurt Business. In fact, the Hurt Business should be dominating right now. They should be the tag champs. Shelton and Cedric should be the tag champs. I think, obviously, Bobby Lashley being the champion. I think as a faction, they should be humongous. I mean, to the point where God, if you wanted to have freaking MVP win something, what's wrong with him lifting that 24/7 title off of Truth and then walling himself with the rest of the Hurt Business so all of them could have gold and making our Truth from somebody to of a highly regarded joke, which is what he's being booked as now, to a guy who's like kind of takes a more serious bent of I'm going to get that title back, but the Hurt Business is actually hurting him and crippling him to keep him away from it. I think you give it a value to that title. But that's not all. So you keep the Hurt Business, you have them as this dominant faction, and meanwhile on the other show, instead of playing things out the way they are with Jay and Jimmy Uso, I think you just have Jimmy join and bow before Roman Reigns, and you make that faction even stronger. And then if you wanted to add somebody else to it, I think that that's powerful as well. But even if you're just running with those three main guys, I think there's something really powerful about that. Because with those three main guys, with Paul Heyman, you have four guys on one side, three guys and one guy who can talk. You see where I'm going with this? Could you imagine if they built up Roman Reigns' group, family, Hurt Business on the other, and then at some point the two of those things interacted and people's imaginations could run wild? Who's better, the Hurt Business or Roman Reigns faction? That you could have an equal debate, and it would be this interesting thing, and the two of them would speak of each other, but they would never confront each other for a long period of time. But they would also acknowledge the other, which is cross-brand promotion in a way that I don't think that they've done in a very long time, except when they try to shoehorn and force-feed things for Survivor Series, which always looks ridiculous. But now imagine that Survivor Series or whatever the pay-per-view that they can make that's supposed to be Raw versus SmackDown. Imagine instead of just a random smattering of Raw guys and SmackDown guys, imagine that the Survivor Series match comes down to Roman Reigns faction against the Hurt Business, and it really matters. Now imagine that that match is something really special. Now imagine that that match comes down to some kind of gimmick match you can do with multiple person groups that are legitimately a team. Imagine it came down to that. Imagine we had discussions about, dude, these guys are really dominant. Imagine we could legitimately discuss a faction in the WWE being the equal or superior to what's going on in AEW. It's certainly more exciting than what they're doing. What do you need if you're going to armchair book? Here, I'm going to give you three things that you can use to evaluate. I think three is a good number. I think it's easy to remember these rules, right? What's being put over? Right, in the case of the Anthony Ogogo thing, I think you're putting over the notion that Anthony Ogogo is a heel and that QT's group is fostering this incredibly powerful heel, right? You're also promoting this idea that Cody is fighting for something other than a concept and an idea. Concepts and ideas are not as powerful as wrestlers think they are. I'm an American and I'm proud to be an American. Nobody cares. I'm just being blunt. I think if you're not attaching it to something personal, it's the reason Hard Times works as a promo, because Dusty Rhodes is the American dream and he's embodying it, right? Cody is just taking on the moniker, but without the true family attachment. And he tried to connect it by talking about Brandy, and we're going to have this child, and then, a time not so long ago where we would have been separate, black and white, but my child epitomizes, and all of that came across very clunky. But I think just by having Anthony Ogogo threatening his family line of like, oh, I could just punch her in the stomach and end this all right now. Whoa. Then it's just like, you know what? I'm going to invoke the spirit of my father by being the American dream. And I'm going to, everything my family is and everything my family aspires to be and has aspired to be, I'm going to embody to take you on for this clash, that you are this wrecking ball. And but you stepped too far. You've made this very personal, and that's what I'm bringing to this match. And you set up Anthony Ogogo more as this cold, dispassionate, like, this is exactly what we planned to get me to this level and this status. And if I can knock Cody off, I'm made. It's very cold and dispassionate, which is what heels should be. Yeah. So it fits that standard. What's being put over? What's being put over if you keep the Hurt Business together and solidify what Roman Reigns is doing? What's being put over is the fact that you have dominant things, right? Dominant factions. And that Raw is every bit as good as SmackDown, because perception wise is that Raw sucks and SmackDown is better. Why not have them both be better and both be great? Yeah, and something to look forward to. And Survivor Series becomes a much more interesting thing in the long run, which helps them bridge SummerSlam and WrestleMania. You got everything in between is just a dead period. And if you look at the numbers that they were pulling during that time last year, oh my God, they were dismal. And this year they're going to be worse, right? Um, how are things better after you've booked it? That's always a good thing that armchair bookers should note. How were things made better? Um, why is Todd versus Sexton versus Manders successful booking? Is because a rising tide lifts all boats, right? Like, it feels like people are a bigger star, whether it's Griff Garrison, whether it's Michael Judas, whether it's the approved, whether it's um, just all these people brought into the mix. Doc Brock's new face group is now in the mix, and all of this stuff. It feels like it is built properly to Shindig, and now we're going to have this big conflagration of a match and all the other matches associated with it. That's how you know it's successful, because the promotion has been made better. There's a spirit and a feeling about that promotion, um, of how interesting it is. Whereas Southern Fried in the past, they've had stuff that's hit, like the Florida versus Georgia thing did hit for a while, but there's never been a feeling that everything was coming up Millhouse. Now it is, right? When something's being booked incredibly successfully and incredibly well, it translates. It translates to more people wanting to see, more people wanting to interact, more people keeping up with what's going on. Southern Honor, right? They have this David Ali versus Logan Creed thing that epitomized by, you know, David Ali punts Logan Creed in the head, and they got an immediate bump off of that, which was the biggest crowd that they drew. And then it steadily went down, steadily went down, steadily went down, which meant a lot of things weren't working. Now, Gary would put some of that on himself and say, well, I wasn't promoting properly and blah, 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 blah. But the simple fact is, and it's one of those things that I love in the Drawing Heat book, is they have these lists of promoter excuses on why stuff didn't draw. It was on this holiday, it wasn't on a holiday, et cetera, et cetera. Just all the stuff that you always hear. But it just comes down to people just didn't want to see your fucking show. And a lot of that can usually be attributed to booking, or at least the feeling of your promotion, which is directly tied into booking. So you want to ask, what's being put over? How are things better as a result of the booking, or are they not? Yeah. So Anthony Ogogo was made by the match with Cody in a sense, but then now he loses, and now apparently he's going to go back for a while. So ultimately, what did it net him? It really didn't net him anything, did it? It was just a one off. That's what it feels like. He was sort of built up for this one off, and now he's done. Now, AEW has shown signs of being able to let people recover and then bring them back stronger before. Look at Miro now, right? I mean, it was the most disastrous debut, and it was disastrous for so many reasons, and it just felt like it was never getting better. And now it did. But I don't think it was part of a calculated plan. I think they just had to just change their complete directions with the booking, and so it is gone. Cool. And then the final thing where you can determine whether something was a success is, what moment did you get out of it? What moment that indelibly imprints itself on the audience's mind that will continue to sort of inception its way into leading you towards things pay off and I'm being rewarded for being a fan. That's the ultimate thing with booking. It doesn't mean faces always have to go over in the end, but it does mean people need to feel a sense of satisfaction of justice being served in some way, shape, or form, or that they have witnessed something historic. So, again, for instance, um, was the crowd overall keen on Britt Baker winning, even though she was the heel over Hikaru Shida? I think yes, but I think there was more of a feeling of, we want this to do well. We want AEW's women's division to show that it is not what it once was, which was, it used to be terrible. Let's just say it. I kept saying, I just want them to have a good match. And I think that they had a match that actually pulled out some surprises. Now, they pulled out every trick in the book. I mean, they kicked out of every freaking thing and countered every freaking thing. And Hikaru Shida gave everything that she could to Britt Baker. Just in terms of ring work, in terms of kick out of everything that I've done to beat people, kick out of everything that I've done to beat you. And then ultimately put me down, and Hikaru Shida survived all of the stuff. I survive Rebel. I survive all of this stuff. And yet I get caught in her hold in the end and taps out. Hikaru Shida just pushed all of her chips on the table for this match and then gave them all to Britt Baker. And it was a lot of chips. And I think Britt Baker recognized that moment. And the crowd did too. And I thought the moment where they thanked Shida at the end was very genuine. I think even people who were like, I'm so sick of Shida, etc., 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 recognized the fact that AEW's women's division has come an awful long way, and Hikaru Shida has been an integral part of that, and has given Britt Baker something very special. Now Britt Baker can hopefully take it and make it even bigger. So that moment was what was put over Britt Baker at the end of the day as the preeminent female star in the business. That sounds like a big statement, Steve. Name me one bigger. Rhea Ripley? You're going to tell me Rhea Ripley is a bigger star than Britt Baker at this current moment? Of course not. What about Bianca Belair? I think Bianca Belair had her moment at WrestleMania, but what about since? Not really. Britt Baker right now is riding high, coming off of the match with Thunder Rosa, which is considered perhaps the best wrestling match this year, maybe in AEW history, certainly best women's match that they had, and now she has won at the flagship show pay-per-view for AEW, and she's beaten Hikaru Shida and beat her clean, more or less. A champion who had been a champion for more than a year. A lot of value there, right? What was put over? Britt Baker. How's it better? It feels like the women's division is in a better place than it once was, as epitomized by that match. And what's the moment? The moment is Britt Baker winning, and the crowd thanking Sheeta for what she did. So don't be afraid to armchair book. Just go in there with a little bit of freaking knowledge first, but it's not enough to have that little bit of knowledge. I think that that's often what a mistake that Gary makes is when he does argue, like when he argued about the exotic youth thing, it came across as very stupid because Zach was able to just pick him apart because he takes a little knowledge and then he just runs with it to push his agenda. That's the problem. Is you really have to sit back and look what's being put over, right? How are things being made better? And what is that moment and that impression you are leaving the fans with to move them, to continue to move them in the right direction to help your promotion overall? Get this booking thing down, get the standards down for wrestlers, promoters, everybody else. If when you can start evaluating things and even looking beyond yourself, I think what we see is a lot of wrestlers who go like, well, basically, if I'm being put under, that sucks. I would be more worried about the show and more worried about your place in it and how to contribute to a thing instead of just seeing everything from a selfish perspective. I think it'll make you better. I think it'll make the promotions better that you work for. And I think it'll make wrestling better overall once we can start evaluating things in that kind of way. Anyway, I'm going to go get breakfast. I'm going to go have fun with my kids, and then I'm going to come back to Orlando and hopefully get this up if the Wi Fi in the room can be a little faster. This has been Stephen Platinum, and this has been Full Disclosure.